Welcome back to episode 2 of World in Flames, where I'm doing the November-December of 1939 turn right now. I think this turn I'm planning on getting naval units more involved, especially with Commonwealth and Germany. They both have some navies there in the North Sea area, and really neither did a whole lot with that. So I'm just going to look to see how I can get them more involved. France and the Commonwealth and Germany are probably just going to be doing a lot of positioning this turn. Since it's winter, I don't expect the weather will be very good right now in really anywhere except maybe the south. And I still need to figure out how to best get Italy into the game. They are really just doing a lot of preparing at the moment, and maybe that's all they should be doing, but I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything key with them and get them involved if I need to. For the Soviet Union this turn, I think it's going to be another turn of positioning. I don't think this turn is probably going to take too long. I think a lot of the armies are just going to be getting their troops moved around the board. Again, it's winter, so there's really not going to be a lot of incentive to do a lot of combat this turn. But the weather could, I could roll such that it's pretty clear weather, so I could totally be proven wrong here. The Soviet Union is going to work on moving some troops over to the border with Iran. I think they're going to try to go to war there, and after that, just start moving west to form up their border with Germany. And over here in Asia, Japan might try to push forward. Again, it really depends on the weather. But Japan might try to move forward here, and China's just going to try to resist them where they can. I do have some units coming in for both those, both Japan and China this turn, so we'll see what kind of effect they have. And with the U.S., I'm planning on doing some garrisoning and probably moving the HQ in the Philippines over to Hawaii. I don't think he's doing a whole lot of good right now there. Unfortunately, I think Japan's going to be able to take the Philippines once they decide to. I think there's some rules that prevent me from doing a lot of garrisoning of the Philippines beforehand anyway. So that's the plan there, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. These are the reinforcements I have coming in this turn. The Axis have a good number of land units coming in this turn, and with the Allies, they're building a lot of boats. Next up will be Initiative. The green die will be Axis, and the red one Allies. And they both roll a 1. Wow. But the Axis have +1 on the modifier here, so the Axis will take the first impulse. Now I'll roll for weather. The last weather modifier, there was no modifier for the last one. It was pretty calm at the end of the last turn. So whatever I roll, this will just be what the weather is. And I got a 3. Which is going to be rain in the Arctic, but fair weather everywhere else. The first part of the impulse is the declare war step, and I think with the weather being good right now in this area, I think Germany's going to go ahead and declare war right now on the Netherlands. And in addition, they will align Bulgaria, which they can do because of the Soviet Bessarabia, Romania item from before. So I will set up the Netherlands units, and we'll go forward. I have set up the Netherlands units. Their navy is there in Rotterdam, and the plane and infantry are in Amsterdam. The reserves will be able to come on during the impulse for the Allies if the Netherlands hold out that long. I rolled for U.S. entry based on Germany aligning Bulgaria and declaring war on the Netherlands. The war against the Netherlands did produce a token, but not the alignment of Bulgaria, so they added 1 there. With that, I'll be moving on to the actual actions for the impulse, and Germany is going to declare a land action, and I will go ahead and move the troops, and we'll be back. So I've gone ahead and done the rail movements and the land movements, and I went ahead and did some air rebases. I didn't mean to do that before the combat, but I did some air rebases. Before I did those rebases, I had no airplanes in range of Amsterdam, so there's not going to be any air support for this battle, but I don't think it'll be necessary. The dice roll modifier for this combat is 13.2, so let's see if that moves to a 14. I roll a 10, so nope. So that'll be 13. I rolled a 7. So it's a result of 20, and again, I should mention this is on the assault table because it's a city, and that's what the defender would choose. So a 20, one of the attackers is lost, 2 of the defenders, and half of the remaining units stay face up. So I'll go ahead and do that. And with that, the Netherlands will be conquered at the end of the turn, and I will need to check to see what to do with those naval units. I believe that they've been overrun because I moved into Rotterdam with troops to fight that combat. So I rolled some dice after the overrun. These naval units here are going to flee, and they're going to go to the United Kingdom. And this one was captured by the Germans, and a few of them were destroyed, and they're off camera right now. So I've spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out what to do with Japan this turn. Part of me wanted to take advantage of a surprise impulse and try to attack here in Hong Kong and down in the Netherlands East Indies before the Commonwealth reinforcements showed up, but I think it's probably a little too early. I think I probably need to... I don't really have the transports in the areas I need them to be, so I think the safer play is to just focus right now still in China and just get things lined up and ready to go for a January or March of 1940 attack into the East Indies. So with that, Japan's going to take a combined action. The first thing they'll do is some naval movement. They get 2 naval moves, and what they will do is move these 2 transports here into the 2 box over here. And they're going to take this amphibious unit here, also going to go into the same spot, and with it, it's going to take this militia unit as well. In addition, I'm moving this militia unit here, and it's embarking on one of the 2 transports that are in the C box. I get 3 land moves on a combined action, so even though I've moved this HQ over here before, I think the best place it's going to go is back out into the water and come back around and head down south. But to do that, to begin with, I need to put it here. I'm going to put him here. It's one of my land moves. That should be fine. The weather is okay here, so he should have the movement for that. And then with my 2 other moves this turn, I'm going to take this 5-4 and move him over 1, and then fill in behind with that militia unit. And I think the last thing that Japan will do are a few air rebases. The planes I've had over here have just not really been put to good use. I keep having them too far away, so I'm going to move them to get them into better position. For rebasing, they get double their range, but on the Asian map, each hex is 2 spaces anyway, so these planes here that have 6 on them will actually get to move 6 hexes to rebase. So I moved them down here just to provide a little bit more firepower. These are in the North Monsoon Zone, so the weather here should be pretty good on the next impulse, and they might be able to do something there next turn. And that is it for Japan. One correction over here, one of the 2 transports that left from this port up here, I'm not actually going to do that. It's going to stay here for now. Otherwise, everything else stays as it was. I think Italy's time is just not quite yet. I think they're waiting for Germany to take care of France. Not sure. Just it doesn't feel like they're quite ready yet, and so I think they're just going to sit here and build strength, and maybe even more than build strength. I think they're going to wait for their opponent's strength to decrease. And with the current weather, we move 2 places on the impulse track. 2 places on the impulse track, and it will be the Allied impulse next. For the Allies, I'm going to start with France. France is just going to do a land action, and they're going to move a lot of land units. That's why one would choose a land action, I think. So along the... let me move the camera. Along the border here with Italy, I've got quite a few units here, and also a militia and an HQ, and I just don't think I need much of these. I think these 3 troops here can probably hold the line. They're in mountains. Italy does not have a whole lot of units up here. I think that will be enough to hold it. And also Italy has not really done a whole lot of aggression at this point, and there's also a lot of Alpine hex sides. So I think I'm okay to move a few of these units. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this HQ. I'm going to move this militia up north. And then I also have the... let me move the camera again. I also have the units here in Paris that need to move, and I think I'll try to get the planes into a little bit better position. And this is what it looks like after the French move. For the USA, the only thing they're going to do on their combined action is to move this one transport from the Pacific coast. I think it was in San Diego. It's over here in the Marshalls, and at the end of the turn, it's going to, or I guess in the next turn, it's going to do a return to base, and it's going to go over to the Philippines. And from there, it will pick up MacArthur to bring him back to Hawaii. China is going to take a land action. I think what they're going to do is say that these hexes here, they may end up falling. I think the better use of the manpower here is to form up a shorter defensive line against the Japanese. So that's what they're going to try to do. They're not going to be able to move too quickly, but we'll just move slowly and see where we can go. So on the land action, we're going to move here, and let me check the table. That is a forest in the Pacific, so that's fine. That should not flip over. He's going to move over 1, because he can, because he's in zone of control, but he can move the 1. This cavalry is going to move over the 1, because the mountain is a 4, and I don't think cavalry is considered to be motorized, but let me check that. No, they're considered legs, so that's okay. That move should be okay. I guess the other thing to think about is were they in supply, but yeah, we've got a town here that should have been giving them supply before they moved. So just sort of reformed up this line here. This HQ is going to move to this mountain hex, but it will flip because it does not have the movement for that. And I'm going to do an air rebase with this plane here. Since Japan moved a lot of their air power, China is going to do the same. And I'm going to try to put it in a location that will actually be useful here. So I don't know if this is the right call or not, but it feels like this might provide China with a bit more defense. It might be weakening, because eventually I'm planning on possibly moving these. Yeah, and I think before the air rebasing, I think I'm also going to move this here. I don't know if it's a good thing or not to sacrifice some of the coastline here, but it feels like it's going to be a better defensive position to consolidate the units as best as I can. I think the Japanese troops are going to have some supply issues as they get pushed inland. I don't know. There's no resources here. There's no factories here. And there's a factory here, but I don't plan. I'm hoping to keep this as the defensive line here. So I think this unit is also going to retroactively move to the left one. It will flip because it doesn't have enough movement for it. It does kind of open up this area here, but the most that can happen is Japan will fill in here. And I mean, this is a mountain. I don't know if this is the right call. I might be making the wrong decision here, but it feels like I might be able to form up a more coherent defensive line that in the long term is going to provide more benefit for China. And then if they're able to repel, or at least hold off the assault here, they may be able to then repel Japan back to the sea once the other countries start to get involved in the war with Japan. Really, the U.S. and Commonwealth need to start to apply some pressure at some point here on Japan. Obviously, it's a little early now, but as soon as they get pressure put on them, I think some of these troops are going to have to go elsewhere, and then that will be China's time to come back and push them back to the sea. All right, the Soviet Union is going to do a combined action. They're going to rail move this unit here over to the HQ I have at the border with Iran. Next, this unit here is going to do a land move down into the port. Here I'm going to move the HQ just over one spot. Here I'm going to move that HQ that way, and this unit here, and that's going to prepare that unit for a rail move next turn. And then lastly, I'll move this unit here into this town. And that is it for the USSR. The Commonwealth is going to take a naval action. I haven't done a lot with commerce raiding yet, like from Germany, but I think that's going to change. So I need to get some boats out there to provide some defense. So the plan is to just put a lot of the ships out and just provide defense for the convoy units that I've got scattered around the board. I don't know tactically which is best. If it's best to try to put the defensive ships in the 0 box with the convoys or in the highest box they can be. On one hand, if they're in the 0 box with the convoys, they're guaranteed to be included in a combat to protect the convoys. On the other hand, they don't get as many surprise points if that's where they're at. So if I put a fleet in like the 3 box, I think they'll get more surprise points if they are indeed involved in the combat, but it's not as guaranteed. So I'm not quite sure about what to do about that. I'm guessing that it will become apparent as I play the game and start actually having these scenarios. So I think what I'll do in the area with Germany, where we are already at war, I'll probably try to put them in the highest C box possible. And if it's Italy that I'm trying to defend against, or even Japan, I'll probably put it in the 0 box because I don't get any surprise points anyways with them if they declare war. So I'll go ahead and move a lot of these ships around, and I'll come back with what I ended up doing. Alright, for the Commonwealth, I moved some of the Dutch units out to the North Sea, just to have some presence there. A little bit of presence up there in the north. The home fleet has moved out to the Bay of Biscay. That's a pretty important convoy area for the Commonwealth. Over on the Americas map, I've got a few subs in the North Atlantic. I moved some naval units out here to Cape St. Vincent, both from Africa and Gibraltar. I moved the Mediterranean fleet here to the Western Mediterranean, and I've also moved a transport here with a troop that's destined to go out to Singapore. Over here, I moved the Pacific Fleet that was based in Australia out to the East Indian Ocean. I think they're going to rebase either to Perth or to somewhere in India. I'm not sure yet, or even maybe Singapore. Yeah, actually, they might end up rebasing to Singapore. We'll see. And I forgot to do this, but this is a reserve that I'm going to have come on for the Netherlands East Indies, and it's going to go here in Batavia, and it will be flipped over because it's a reserve. And then a few more ships just out here in the Coral Sea, just patrolling. So I look forward to forgetting to move one of these back into port at the right time, but I think just having a bit of a naval presence out here to help protect all of the Commonwealth convoys will be important. And with that, that is the end of the Allied Impulse. It's the end of the Allied Impulse, so it'll move to the Axis next. And we need to roll for weather. Rolled another 3. So it will just continue to be fine weather everywhere except for the Arctic, which will be rainy. And we'll keep moving forward 2 spaces at a time. This is really quite good weather for November, December. So at the beginning of the Axis Impulse is the declare war phase. So I think what I'm going to do here is Germany is going to declare war on Belgium. Since the weather is good and I have enough face-up units, I think I can try to make that push for Germany there. And I've been debating for a long time on whether or not I should get Italy involved in the war right now, because there is a 7-3 Commonwealth troop right now moving through the Mediterranean Sea. And I think Italy, on a surprise naval impulse, could probably take that out before it goes out to Asia. But I don't think it's quite worth it for Italy to get involved yet. I think that would be the only benefit of them getting in the war now, is to take out that unit. And I don't think it's quite worth it. If they wait until at least 1940, the U.S. entry chip situation gets a little better for them. The average number is lower. They're not quite ready to go in Africa yet, I think. And then I also want to try to get a Marine built to try to take Malta on their surprise impulse. So I think the cons outweigh the pros of Italy declaring against the Commonwealth right now. It's close. Yeah, I still am just not quite sure. This might not be the right decision, but I think they're going to still hold off just a little bit longer. And with Germany declaring war on Belgium, that's a dice roll for U.S. entry. And I roll a 4, so that will produce a chip. This is what the U.S. entry pool looks like right now. The German-Italy one has a total of 10 in it, and Japan has 7, but you take 1.5 times its pool plus half times the other pool. So the German-Italian one is at 18.5, and the Japanese pool is at 15.5. And here's what it looks like after Belgium has been set up. Note that because it's 1939, I do have a plane and a boat with 1939 on them that don't come in yet. They get put on the production circle to come out on the next turn. Belgium will align with the Commonwealth, but because of that, the French fighter here, I'm not sure if that's on camera, but the French fighter I have down here, I don't think will be able to take part in any kind of intercept missions when Germany comes in. I could be wrong on that. So for a ground strike mission, I'm going to bring in this plane here and this plane here to do ground strikes. So this one here is a 3. I get to roll 2 dice because they are surprised. There's just 1 unit there. And I roll a 0 and a 5, or a 10 and a 5, so nothing happens there. And then in this other combat, this one here, the factor is 4, and there's 2 units there, so this is for the top unit. I need a 4 or less. I get a 2 and a 4. So the top unit is flipped over, and then for the bottom unit, I get a 1 and a 3. Wow. So both units here in Liège are going to be flipped over. Next up are rail moves, and I went ahead and did 2 of those. I moved a unit here to this HQ, and here to this stack. Yeah, there to that stack. Both of those came from Warsaw. And I'll move on to doing land moves next. I've moved some troops in, and we'll go on to doing combat. Alright, so first up will be the combat here in Liège. I'm going to move 2 of these planes into the combat. And then, let's see, I've got a 5, a 6, a 7, a 5, a 5, a 5, and I'm going to use the 8 here to all attack there. It's a surprise impulse, so the river does not matter. I'm using HQ support with him, which will provide another 1.5 to the dice roll modifier. And I realized in my last video I did that wrong, so he doesn't get flipped over. He gets flipped over for providing the HQ support before you flip over units that have to flip over after attacking based on the combat, the chart. So that flipped over unit can't count as one of the ones that gets flipped over based on the combat. So I did that wrong last time. I'll try to correct that here this time. So the total combat roll modifier in Liège here is 14.5. That's taking into account the face down units, the factory, the HQ support, and the odds. So on a 6 or better, it'll go up to 15. Okay, I got an 8. Sorry, I did that wrong. So for fractional odds, you need it to be 1 through whatever the odds are. So I would have needed 1 through 5 to increase it. So it's an 8, so it does not increase. So the combat roll modifier is 14. So I'll roll that. And I get a 9. So 9 plus 14 is 23, which is off the chart. Or rather, it's the last item on the chart. So both units will be destroyed here, and none of my units as Germany will have to flip over. So I'll clean this up and move on. And now moving on to the combat here in Brussels. So I still have the 9 left over here, as well as the 7. And I've got 1 more plane that's going to contribute. So that altogether, including the factory, is a combat roll modifier of 11.0. So I'll just go ahead and roll that. And I get a 13. So 13 plus 11 is off the chart, so same result. And I'll clean this up here. And with that, Belgium has been conquered by Germany. Though it's incompletely conquered, and they will, when it comes around to the conquer phase of the turn, they will end up choosing a Commonwealth home country as their new home country. At the end of Germany's turn, I'm going to do a reorganization using this HQ here to reorganize these 2 land units right here. And I also need to roll to see if that convoy point there is overrun. I got a 9. I'll check out what that means. I think that means it gets away. Italy's taking a combined action but doing nothing with it. And Japan's taking a combined action. So first is naval movement. They get 2 naval moves. The first thing they're going to do, and I know this is off camera, but there's an HQ up here in northern China that's going to, it's co-located here with a transport, and it has a movement of 3, so that transport's going to move out into the China Sea, and then the South China Sea, and then it's going to move into the port here, and it's taking its cargo with it. So it will flip over, but the cargo will not. The other move is going to be the strike force here. It's going to move 1 to the China Sea and 2 to the South China Sea, which means it... Okay, that's off camera, but it's in the 2 zone of the South China Sea sea box. Next are land moves. They get 3 for a combined action. The first one I'm going to do is move this militia unit down here. I don't think it'll flip over. It's in supply for being here on the coast, and that forest is only 3 movement points to move into, and there's no weather effect, so I think that's okay. I'm going to move this unit to the town, and this unit to the town, and they'll be rail moved in the future. Alright, and then on to land combat. And we've got a few things going on here, so I'm going to go in order. The attack that they'll be doing is right here in this hex. There is shore bombardment for the Japanese, and they've got... I don't know, 5. They've got 5 battleships there, but they can only use 4 of them because there are only going to be 4 attacking units. And they're in the 2 sea box zone, so each of their shore bombardment factors will be reduced by 1, so they'll add a total of 8. I'm using offensive HQ support here, so that'll provide another 1 support. And then we will fly some ground support missions. So both of these bombers are going to go here as well. And we're going to have interception from him. So we'll actually get to do an air combat before the ground combat. Okay, so I've moved the planes over here just to illustrate a little bit better. The Chinese army has 1 fighter, and the Japanese have 2 bombers. So the air-to-air combat factor of the Chinese plane is 2, because it's a fighter. It would add a 10th to any fighters behind it, but there are none. Because the Japanese have no fighters, it will use the front bomber only air-to-air combat factor, which is also a 2. So they're both a 2, which means that the difference between them is 0, and so we'll be rolling on the 0 column of the chart. Alright, the inactive side rolls first, so that would be the Chinese. So they'll roll 2 dice, and they get a 12. Which results in the attacker clearing through any 1 defending bomber. So that means the Chinese get to pick 1 of the Japanese bombers here and clear it through. So I think they'll clear through the front one. That doesn't change the combat factor of this round, but it'll make any future combat with this one worse for the Japanese. So the 1 bomber has been cleared through. Then the Japanese will roll. They get a 12, but because there is no bomber here, nothing happens. Yeah, so it would go to another round here, but I think Japan is actually going to abort their remaining bomber so that it stays safe. So it will return flipped over. So with all of the attacking combat factors being halved for either being across a straits or a river, with the 8 added on from the shore bombardment and the 2 from the 1 plane that made it through, the combat modifier here is 13.3. So on a 1 through 3, I will go up to 14. Oh, I roll a 3. So it's going to be plus 14. And I roll a 9. So 9 plus 14 is 23. Which will destroy the defender, and all of the attacking units will stay face up. And this is what it looks like after that combat. Japan has moved into this hex with the Marine unit and the HQ that flipped over because it provided HQ support. And that will be the end of Japan's turn, so that's the end of the Axis turn. Moving on to the Allies' next turn. Commonwealth is going to do a combined action. France is going to do a land action. And I'm just going to do some shuffling here. I think the best case here is to form as short of a line in defense here as possible, and then meet up over here with the Maginot. So Belgium is not yet conquered. That happens at the end of the turn. So I think the British can go in no problem because they are aligned. Belgium is aligned to the Commonwealth, so that should be fine. And I'll be able to move France in if I move in with a HQ first, meeting foreign troop commitment limits. I think that's right. But that's the plan. I'm also going to do a few naval moves with the Commonwealth. I'm going to move a transport that's up a little bit further north, down south, that we got from the Netherlands, and the troop that's moving over from the Mediterranean over to Southeast Asia is going to move as well. So I'll do those moves and come back. This is where the units ended up. I know I'm doing this backwards. I know this was supposed to happen first, but it's all right. I'm going to do ground strike. And I'll move some things to show where I'm doing ground strike. One thing to keep in mind, I haven't really mentioned this before, but I'm not going to really do cap a whole lot, if at all, because part of the point of cap is guessing where the enemy is going to go before they send their planes, but I already know what I'm doing when I do it. So it feels like the point of cap is being defeated if I were to do it against myself here. So if you don't see me use cap, that's a reason why. But I'm going to do some ground strikes. Again, this is supposed to happen before the land movement, but it's not going to matter in this situation, I don't think. All right, so the French moved their bomber here. There's 2 units under that. And then the Commonwealth moved 2 of their bombers here, and there are 2 units under that as well. And here we have a 2 and a 3. So I'll go ahead and roll for these. None of the German fighters are in range to intercept. So lesson learned, I need to get them really quite close to the front line here. So for the French one, it's got a factor of 3. So for the top unit, an 8. And for the other one is a 5. So nothing comes from that. And then for the 2 Commonwealth planes, the top one is a 2. So the 2 will roll for the top unit, which needs a 2. Oh, I got a 1. So the top unit is flipped over. And then it'll try to roll against the bottom unit. And I roll another 1. So that plane did quite well all by itself. So the 2 German units in this hex here will be flipped. But the 2 here will not be. And I think that is it along this front for Commonwealth and France. They are just trying to provide as much defense as possible. Oh, one other thing I was going to do, I'm going to do an aircraft rebase with this fighter. He's going to move just up 1. But yeah, I think the goal here is to hold out as long as possible. At some point, the weather should turn a little bit worse and slow the German advance here. Oh, and these need to be flipped. The U.S. is doing a combined action. The only thing they're doing is moving a transport that's out in the Pacific Ocean over here to the Philippines. And that will turn face down. USSR is doing a combined action. They will do a rail move with this unit here, and it will go over towards the border with Iran. And for land moves, this HQ is just going to move across the water here. I've been trying to figure out what to do with China for a little bit here, and I'm not quite sure. I think they might actually be in the best spot they can be in right now. I'm trying to think about the different ways that Japan might attack. It's possible that they... Is that on camera? So down here at the bottom, there's some Japanese units here. This spot might get attacked, or the Japanese might move around to get that resource. The Japanese might want to attack in this way here. This is another hex that is certainly possible to be attacked. But I was giving thought to maybe retreating from this spot and reinforcing here. I don't know. That feels wrong to give up a city. I'm not really sure. I was thinking about moving this unit over here to reinforce this factory, but if this hex is Chinese controlled, then that really prevents the number of Japanese units that can get to that can attack this hex here. Whereas if I move that cavalry unit to the left one, it's possible that the other unit here would fall. And right now it's flipped over, so it can't move anyway. I don't know. I think I'm just going to leave him here. I'll do a land action, but not actually do anything. I don't think there's anywhere... The lakes here are preventing me from moving any of these units. So like I can't shuffle them this way. I can't move these troops here and then this troop here and these troops here. Like I'd like to move kind of everybody from here down the line, but this lake here is preventing it, and the terrain back here is mountainous, so they would flip over. And I can't leave any holes in the line right now, or else the Japanese troops will come in. So I think the safest thing to do here is to sit still and wait for the weather to turn and reinforce. I've got a few units coming in next turn. So that's the end of the Allied impulse. If I roll a 1, I can move it so you can see it. If I roll a 1, that is the end of the turn. I roll a 3, it is not the end of the turn. So I will now roll for, so we'll move the axis. It'll be the axis impulse here, and we'll roll for weather before moving on. I roll a 1, so it's even better weather than we had last time. It's fair everywhere. This has been a very mild November, December. Alright, so moving on to Germany. I talked earlier about trying to get Germany's Navy more involved, and I haven't really done that yet. But I think I'm going to do that now, and I realize it's a bit off camera. There we go. So I'm going to move their Atlantic fleet, and they've got a naval bomber here. I'm going to move it out into the North Sea. So the Netherlands troops, the Dutch troops here, have a few boats in the North Sea. Their whole goal was to protect maybe some convoys that may or may not have needed to come out here this turn. They haven't been needed yet, but they were out there to provide patrol. But I think this would be a time for Germany to move out there and just see if they can to find them and maybe pick them off this turn. So I will take a look and see what sea box everything can go into and be right back. Okay, so I've moved their fleet and the naval air unit here to the 3 box of the North Sea, and the Dutch will be in the 4th sea box. And moving on to naval combat, so we'll go to the search roll. Okay, because this is my first naval combat ever, I think, I'm going to just kind of go step by step. I won't go through the details of all of this maybe in the future, but I'm going to do it now. So for naval combat, first thing we need to do is initiate a combat. So to initiate a combat in the sea area, I need to face down one of my face-up units that is at war. So I've got the ships over on the fleet tracker over there. I will go flip one of them over. Okay, in response to this, the Commonwealth will move a naval air bomber here into the 1 section. It only gets half the range on an interception mission like this. For committing units, every unit here will be committed. Alright, for the search modifier, this box here is a 4. This box here is also 4 because I have one friendly nav in it, and this is 2 because it has a friendly nav in it. So I'll go ahead and roll the dice. The green will be the Axis and the red will be the Allies. So Axis get a 5 and the Allies get an 8. Let me see what that means. Okay, so both of the navies rolled higher than the highest modified search number in their sections. So Allies were at 4 and the Axis were at 4. Both of them are above 4, so nothing happens. Alright, so maybe we'll get to see a naval combat at some point in the future, but it won't be right now. Down here, Germany will do some land moves. I don't think there's going to be any combat, but they will just get into position along the front line, and I'll come back with where they end up. Okay, so that's the end of the land moves for Germany. They're just really forming up the line here. And then I'm going to rebase some aircraft here to get the fighters closer to the front line. And this is where they've ended up. Italy will continue to do nothing with their combined action. Okay, on to Japan. I think Japan's going to be quite aggressive here this turn. Over here in the China Sea, I've got a 4-3 militia on a transport. That transport is going to move into this canton here. It'll flip over the transport, and then the unit will disembark for free. They're doing a combined action, by the way. I'm going to then do land moves. This marine unit is going to move across the river and take that resource. Now, at the moment, Japan doesn't have any way to get that resource back to Japan, but it does deny it to China. Then I'm going to debark naval units at sea. I have an amphibious transport over here, also in the China Sea, and the 6-2 militia on it is going to debark here into this hex, if I can get it there. And that transport will flip over. So at the moment, I believe everything is in supply. Everything here is along the coast, which means they're getting supply from the transports I have over here. The only thing not on the coast is this one Marine, but he's being able to get supply through this HQ who's on the coast. The HQ has a, you can't see it, but it's got a reorg value of 2, so he can supply up to 2 units with supply inland from, typically you need to get supply through the port for the HQ, but as he's on the coast, he can supply 2 inland units with supply, so just the 1 Marine here at the moment. Alright, right here I have no rivers going into this hex, so all the units that are here, here, and here, attacking here, and then China would include this 1 plane as part of the combat, would give Japan exactly 4-to-1 odds here. I don't think they're going to get much better than that at the moment, and I think they'd have the opportunity to do quite a bit of damage if they roll well, especially since there's a rail line. Oh, well, never mind. That rail line, it doesn't connect to where this Marine is at yet, but still, I think the odds, I could wait for the planes to flip over next turn, but I think, oh, sorry, this plane should be here. Yeah, so I think I'm going to go ahead and make this attack. It's a little risky, but the modifier here will be +8. And here we go. Alright, so Japan rolls a 14. So 14 plus 8 is 22. Unless I mention it's a blitz, it's never a blitz because they don't have the right units here, so this is on the assault table. So a 22 on the assault table is 2 defending units destroyed, and half of the attacking units have to flip face down. And here's what that looks like after combat. This airplane here rebased up here because it was overrun, and then Japan moved into that hex. Alright, that's the end of the Axis impulse. So now on a 3 or lower, the turn ends. 6, it does not end, and we move to an Allied impulse. Alright, so after looking at the board, I think every allied nation is going to try to pass. And I think they're going to pass because right now the most important thing is to get some of their reinforcements on the board as quickly as possible. So because they're all going to pass, that's going to be +2 to this dice roll to see if the turn ends. Normally it would need a 4 or lower, but I'll need a 6 or lower right now to end the turn. And I get a 1. So the turn does end, and because the last impulse was an allied impulse, the marker does not move along the initiative track either way. So with that, I will go on to end of turn activities. First up is a roll for partisans. It's an 8. So an 8 is Greece, Spain, Hungary, France, Yugoslavia, Portugal, South America, the Netherlands, East Indies, and India. Alright, first up is India. I have 3 face-up units in India to act as garrison, and their partisan number is 5, so I will go ahead and roll the dice. Get a 1, so plus the 3 is 4, which means they do get partisans, so I need to figure out how to do that. Alright, so pulling randomly from the partisan pool, give me this one here, and I think, so it needs to go outside of zone of control of any of the other, of the Commonwealth units here, and so I think this is probably the right spot to put it. Well, there's a port, there's a factory, so the Commonwealth units will need to go reclaim that hex to get that port and that factory back. And for the Netherlands East Indies, there's 1 face-up unit here as garrison. I get a 3, so plus 1 is 4, which is lower than 5, so they're also going to get a partisan. So this one I'm going to put out here on this island. And the reason I'm going to do that is because right now it is Allied controlled, or it's with the Netherlands. And if I were to put it on some of the oil, it would reduce the oil going to the Commonwealth. But Japan's goal in the not too distant future is to conquer the Netherlands East Indies. And I think that this partisan is only going to hinder that for them in the future. So I think the Axis will put it just kind of out of the way and in an area that once it does flip control, the Allies are not really able to do anything with either. So I think that's where it's going to go. It's pretty much going to be out of the way for, I think, the game, but we'll see. Entry markers have been placed on the Germany-USSR border, and one has been added to the Japan entry pool. U.S. entry options chosen this time were resources to Western allies and resources to China. And both of those, when I rolled, I did end up having to move one token from the pool to the tension pool. I picked randomly, and both of them happened to be the biggest one that was there. So now there's a decent amount of tension, but the entry pools themselves have been reduced by quite a bit. Almost all units that were at sea have returned to base. I flipped over everything back to being face up. Everything had a supply route of at least, or it could trace a basic supply route of any length, so everything could flip back over. And now on to the production phase. So here's what I've chose to buy for the Allies. For China, I'm buying some infantry. I took a look at the different militia options, and well, I really only have one militia option, and it would come in sort of away from the battle line, so I think by the time I got it moved over to the front line, it might be just as quick to build this infantry. So that's the plan. I'm going to build those 2 infantry. I did use the oil that was sitting in China that was 1 hex away from the Japanese troops just before they could get to it. For France, I'm building a militia and a motorized unit. I think I should have enough time for the motorized unit to come in before France falls here. For the Commonwealth, just starting some battleships, bought a fighter, and then just randomized randomly. So everything here was randomly picked from their force pool, but I picked infantry as well, just with the remaining points. For the Americans, I bought a carrier plane, also got some battleships going with them, a convoy point, and an amphibious transport. And for the USSR, a tank and a mechanized. So I think I think my plan here was to just keep buying the long lead time items. There are a lot of infantry and a lot of militia, a lot of garrison units that I need to be buying for the Soviet Union here pretty soon. But next turn, they're going to have a lot more production points, and those don't take that long to come in. So I think next turn for the Soviet Union, you're going to see a lot of infantry being built. We'll see, but I think that's the plan. So sort of the same story for the Axis here, just buying long lead time things. I've got 2 amphibious transports I'm going to queue up here for Japan, and then a few quick militia units that can be shipped over to the front with China. Italy's building a marine unit. I think that'll be helpful for what they intend to do in the Mediterranean. And then with Germany, also some longer lead time items, some armor and some mechanized units. And finally for this turn is the conquest phase, so that would mean that Belgium and the Netherlands have both been conquered by Germany, and I think both of them are going to choose India as their new home country. I think that's allowed. Yeah, so that looks like it's allowed. However, because their home countries were conquered, the next thing that needs to happen is any land or air troop of theirs that is outside of a certain distance from their new home country gets destroyed. So the way I read that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I read that is this territorial of Belgium will be removed from the game, and this militia unit from the Netherlands will be removed from the game. Now I've got 2 units here. One of them belongs to the minor country, Netherlands East Indies, and the other one is a actual Netherlands unit that goes into the Netherlands East Indies. So I believe only this one is the one that gets destroyed, removed from the game, because no matter what I roll, it's going to be too far away from their new home country of India. I've also removed from the force pools everything that is not a convoy point from both of those minor countries. And there actually was one naval unit in the production circle for Belgium because they were attacked on the same year that was on the back of the ship. So it got added to the production circle, and I rolled a 6, so that will be, when that comes out next turn, it'll be German. The reason I decided to choose India as their new home country is because it seemed like a good place to be able to put convoy points out for them. it'll just help me put out more convoy points over here in the Indian Ocean by choosing either the Netherlands or Belgian convoy points to put out. So that is the end of the turn. Just a few thoughts before closing out this video. I feel like Germany is moving very quickly through the Low Countries, and I think that had to do with the weather. I was not expecting to be right up there on the border with France. I guess they're just one away, but they're basically on the border here with France. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that to happen quite so quickly. I think the French and Commonwealth troops there along the border are going to last for at least a few turns. Well, hopefully, I do have a few French units coming in the next few turns, so hopefully they'll be able to help reinforce a little bit. Obviously, I'm just trying to slow Germany down at this point, but anything they can do would be great. Italy, I really need to get Italy involved. I built their marine unit this time. I think eventually what I'd like for them to try to do is take Malta on the surprise impulse. Yeah, obviously, I'm also the Commonwealth player, so I'm going to have to try to balance knowing that information and not knowing that information as the Commonwealth player. I don't know if it's typical for the Commonwealth to reinforce Malta or not, so I'll just have to see how that plays out. And then the Soviet Union, I need to get building on some of their infantry and start forming up their lines. I realize it's more than just the turns to build the infantry. They also need to move the infantry into place, which could take a while, especially if they're not at war and they don't get land actions. So I think probably starting next turn when their production multiple increases, I will start building some infantry and get them out on the board. I tried to do a little bit more with naval combat this time. I tried to do a naval combat, but the two fleets couldn't find each other. But I suspect we'll have some more in the future, especially over on the Pacific map. Over here on the Asia and Pacific maps, we've got the USSR is amassing some troops there on the border with Iran. I think I'm going to try to bring one more over before declaring that. Though honestly, I might wait a little bit until I'm ready to move the land troops, the land units, around over on the USSR's western front, because if I'm at war with Iran, it means I get a land action, which means I can more efficiently move the troops around. So I might just be sitting there for a while before actually doing anything about that, especially since the Commonwealth is still getting an oil at the moment from Iran. So we will see where that goes. And then regarding the battle in China here, I feel like I'm either misplaying China or misplaying Japan. I feel like Japan's making some really good progress here, and I don't know if it's because I'm focusing too much on the land battle as Japan at the expense of not fortifying some of Japan's islands, or if I'm misplaying the defense with China here. I feel like that push, that southern push there by Japan is probably going to be pretty devastating if I can get things into place there. And I've got another unit coming over from Japan next turn, so I'm not sure. And I could be wrong. Maybe the terrain will be too difficult for me to push through as Japan as I move further north here. We'll find out. And the U.S. Next turn is going to move MacArthur over to Hawaii. They really can't do much at this point, as they can only do combined actions, and they don't really have any land units to move about. So, just building up naval units, and they'll be in the game soon enough. So, with that, thank you for watching, and look forward to January, February of 1940.